Good evening, and thank you for joining our fourth installment of the Springs Advocacy 101 series, Making an Impact in the Capital. I am very happy to be joined today by Florida Springs Council's brand new lobbyist, but a guy who I've worked with for more than a decade and has been around the Capital for a lot longer than that. Travis Moore. Thanks for being here, Travis.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. It's been a pleasure. I've worked with you, admired your work, the organization's work for many years, and so thrilled to be able to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, it's, one of the things that I really admire about your work is, I've seen you just, over the past 10 years, just develop and develop and develop. Last year at the end of session, something happened I haven't seen happen before, which was when Senator Bradley and Senator Pizzo called you out for basically a standing ovation on the Senate floor for your work on condos and HOA work. And I think it's one of the things that makes you so effective is that you're able to work in these different realms, not just on one issue, but work across issues, across aisles. And I think that makes you an incredible resource for FSC in the community.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that could have gone one of two ways. When Pizzo picks up a microphone to call you out, he can either be calling you out to embarrass you, or certainly, that was the first time I received that that kind of recognition, because normally the work we do is certainly behind the scenes, and so yeah, I appreciated it. But thanks.
So tell everybody a little bit about your background. How did you get into being a lobbyist? Because it's one of those fields, you can't go to like law school. There's lawyers that end up lobbyists, there's policy guys, but there's not like a career track that automatically ends up in becoming a lobbyist. So kind of what's your journey?
Well, real briefly, college, I was in at USF in St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay area, and was working for Allstate's National Claims Service Center. They had just started after Hurricane Andrew in '92. So they had this big call center. It was back kind of when call centers were starting to be a thing. And it was a 24-hour-a-day operation. So it was great for a college student because you could take a 4-hour shift in the middle of the night. And being a highly regulated industry, they had a very active PAC. They had a lot of employees in this particular location, a few thousand. So they were very active in getting those employees involved. And this was back when, Jeb Bush was running for governor. Charlie Crist was the state senator in our area. Sandy Mortham was Secretary of State, and they were bringing people through. And then I got to meet the lady that ended up actually being a member of the House. Leslie Waters was running their PAC. And she brought a young guy that was running for the House in '94 that had worked for the insurance commissioner, and we hit it off and got to know each other. And after he won, he said, "Hey, I was at that point had just graduated," and he said, "I don't think you want to be just an insurance person your whole life." And I said, "Absolutely not." And he said, "How would you like to come work for me? We can kind of change the world. A state rep has an aide and a secretary, so it's just a very small operation." So I said, sure. So I moved to DeLand, Florida, in Volusia County, and started to work with him. And that's when I actually got to realize the springs that we have here in Blue Springs, et cetera, in that part of the state. And went to work for then the Florida House, and then wanted to get back to the Tampa Bay area. I had a friend that was leaving to go back to USF for grad school who was working for a state senator. Started working for the Senate, worked for the Senate for a number of years, and then went to work for a couple of different law firms in their governmental affairs practice groups. And then, realized, I could kind of just take some of these clients on my own and develop others. And so then started my own practice, More Relations, Inc. In 2003. The very end of 2002, but we really kind of launched in 2003. So now it's been 22 years. And it's been great. In the last few years, have really built up the silo on the conservation side.
Excellent. All right. Well, for folks, if you want to ask questions of Travis or I, you can leave those questions in the comment chat box on your screen, and we will get them. And we're going to cover as many questions as we can. at the end of the webinar. So please go ahead and drop those into the box. And Chloe, we're getting a message that it's not showing. So look into that. Okay, Chloe's on it. All right. So we're going to start out a little bit talking about kind of some of the things that I have not been doing this nearly as long or as well as Travis, but I have been shocked by the Florida legislative process. It's not what they teach you on PBS
No.
when you're a kid. And I think one of the things that really shocked me was that we have a very short legislative session in Florida. Tell folks, like, what's the calendar like?
Yeah, there's some states like New Jersey. I'll use them as an example. They're perpetually in session. They could always be doing something, much like Congress. They're pretty much always in session with certain recesses. But I think that they don't get anything. I mean, Congress certainly doesn't get anything done. And I think if you're always there, there's not a sense of urgency, because you're right. We have especially being such a large state, huge budget, third largest state in the country, budget of literally many countries. But we have that 60 days forces action. A lot of it is at the very end of those 60 days, but they have to get things done in that pressure cooker.
Right, and that's one of the things that surprised me is, with that short of a time frame, it's really, the last 3-4 weeks when the vast majority of things happen. And last year we saw a lot of big stuff happen on the last day or two.
Right. Yeah. It's a matter of setting everything. You kind of want to set everything up. Even now, we've been together this week with committee weeks here in Tallahassee, which we can talk about. They do have that kind of activity where they can move bills through the committee process. They just can't vote and pass them on the floor. They're not on the floor. They can't send them to the governor or anything like that, but they can get it all ready. So the whole thing is just a matter of getting your stuff through the committee process, through, just really getting it into position for those last couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And then of course, Florida, at least for the past 20 years, has really been one party control. And so I guess really the one party control started about the time that you opened up your own firm.
Yeah. So, right. Because in 96, when I started in 94, the House was still under Democrat control. The Senate was basically split, but very, very close, but Republican control. But we still had the governor was Governor Childs at the time. And then so it wasn't until 98. Right, when the Governor Bush won, and we kind of changed into since then it's been kind of Republican control all the way. But I will just say, last year, starting last year, something happened that had not happened, at least. So like the last 6 years with the governor we have now, the legislature was kind of treated as an executive branch agency. They did not push back. They were given a bill. From the governor's office, they would run it without changing a comma. They would approve any appointee. It was literally might as well have been just a state agency of the governor. Well, last year, we had a new speaker come in after the 2024 election, and right off the bat, through a special session, even as it dealt with immigration, before they even started the regular session, the Speaker of the House, Danny Perez, said, we're going to stand up and we're a branch of government. We're the legislative branch of government. We have a legitimate, we're part of that 3-branch system. We're going to start acting like it. And for the first time, certainly in many years, but certainly last 6 with our current administration, they pushed back. And now, whether it's on, immigration, property tax, whatever the case may be, there's certainly the House is much more frisky, and it's not an automatic as it relates to the governor's agenda.
Right. And I think I remember, gosh, it was I think it was when Christopher Foley was speaker and the House passed the budget and went home. There was a
Right.
news article. Yeah, one of
Yeah.
the, maybe Pittman, but someone great wrote, there's three political parties in Florida: the Democrats, the House Republicans, and the House and the Senate Republicans. And it seems like really the most fierce fights are inter-party. It's not Democrats versus Republicans. It's Dems versus Dems and Republicans versus Republicans, where things tend to get the nastiest.
Yeah, well, the Republicans had run out of, they'd run out of people to fight. There's just so many of them now. I mean, they could literally, the House could go into session, have a quorum, without even the Democrats don't even have to be there. So it has become, and so that's exactly where the fights are. And the governor, was pushing, and the speaker is, young lawyer from scrappy part of Miami-Dade County, and was not going to take that, and said, no, I mean, you got to, we want to work together, but you've got to respect who we are in this process, and we're not just going to do whatever you say. And so it became like the House was the thing. So the old like Marine Corps, is it God core country? So it's us. We're not going to be shoved around.
Right. And I think that really leads very well to the next point, which is,
and I was all for it. I was all, I mean, this is great.
Yeah.
We can really get things done when they're not just all rubber stamping the process.
Right. And I mean, while I'm not a huge fan of some of the budget stuff the House did, on policy, they were great. And, I don't think we saw a lot of Speaker Perez putting his thumb on the scale on policy issues. He seemed he really seemed to let his folks do their job. He trusted the committee chairs, trusted people to make their own decisions, which isn't always what we see, which kind of gets to the third bullet point, that the legislature is incredibly leadership driven. I mean, there are officially 160 elected representatives and senators in the building. But really the ones that have the influence and control tend to be the speaker, the president, the chairs of the major committees, and then, whoever's coming up the line next.
Right. Yeah. So like a Dan Webster, who was the first Republican speaker since Reconstruction, he was in the legislature. It was also before term limits, but he was there for 20 years. So because they literally, there were no term limits, so they could just wait and work and plot from the back rows and move up a row and continue. Well, now you have 8 years. There is no, and they literally have lined up the speakerships, like, air traffic control coming into the airport, where those planes are lined up. So they already know who the next speaker is. In 2026, they know who it is in 2028, and they've now just decided who it's going to be in 2030. So they already have all of that, lined up, assuming that they don't lose, a ton of seats, which the way the districts are, they're just not competitive. The way that the districts are competitive now are in primaries. So a Republican would be afraid that he would get attacked from like the right or whatever. So if you don't want to alienate leadership, because then they'll be like, all right, we'll just find somebody to run against you.
Right. And you made a really good point that when you're in your primary, you're typically worried about someone coming from a more extreme position.
You're right, or you're left if you're a D, right?
Because we have closed primaries in Florida, which I think is, if I could wave a magic wand, that's something that I would change. But that basically means that, only registered Democrats can vote in the Democratic Party primary. Only registered Republicans can vote in the Republican primary. And if you're
the largest block of voters, independents, like I'm a registered MPA because of what
as am I.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I could say, hey, look, I'm an MPA. But that means, unfortunately, a big bunch of us are kind of disenfranchised from we don't vote in the primary system. So,
right. So it really pushes everything towards the extreme. And I also love that you brought up term limits, because I think term limits have had a few effects. One, like you said, with like Speaker Webster, or a lot of the legislators that I got to know after they were out of office, who were there for 20 or 30 years, they became experts in something, right? Education, environmental policy, healthcare. But they really knew it. They knew their issue. They knew it in and out. And today, you just don't have enough time. I mean, I've been doing this for 13 years and I'm still learning, and I don't have to go run for office or do anything else. All I have to do is try to learn, and I still can't keep up. So, I think that really gets to the next point, which is that, the legislature on the back end is really controlled by committee staff, industry, agency folks. I mean, the people who are writing the bills, writing the amendments. This is, I don't mean this in a derogatory term. I mean, this is whether you're after something good or bad, you're going to have to push it. It's really hard to find a legislator.
The staff director for, these Senate committee staff directors, they're the ones that have been there for, literally 30 years. So they've gone through chair after chair. And if you're an industry, like I'm dealing with issues where, I know there's some stuff that the developers want to do that is just extremely bad. And there's one particular senator that hates what they're doing. We're very close. And she's like, has made it clear, not going to happen. She chairs the committee. So they're like, we're not going to do it this year. And I know it's because they think, oh, you know what? We're waiting it out. We just have to wait out this person. So that's why it's so important for us as advocates, and we all are special interest. And there's nothing, Springs, that's a special interest that we're involved
Absolutely.
in. But we have to be doing this all the time because trust me, the development community and others are not, they'll take a year off because they're playing the long game. And so we have to make, on certain things. So.
Right. One of the things that I've seen, I wonder what your thoughts are on this, are because of the term limits, but also, leadership, basically they get 2 years, right? You get 2 years as speaker, Senate president, appropriations chair, a very, very short period of time. And it leads to each class needing to outdo the one before. And I think, maybe the clearest example of this is taxes. Good luck being a Republican in Florida that's not running on cutting taxes. But after 30 years of cutting taxes, we're getting close to the bone of what the state can sustain. So now, for the first time, we're talking about eliminating property taxes, right? And it just seems like, typically the first line on the press release at the end of the year is how much money was cut in taxes, how many was saved. I can't even imagine if you were to add all those up, what our budget could be, especially as we struggle with a lot of issues in Florida that really could use more funding. And I think if we had someone in charge for 20 years, they'd have a more sensible approach.
You can't have the CEO. Now, I don't know of an organization where the CEO of that's writing and involved with a over $100 billion budget is replaced every 2 years. So, and so say the Speaker of the House, you don't get a chance to really put something in to, and so what happens is also we don't ever go back and look at the other, like you couldn't put something in place in year one, say you had a 4-year term, and then go back and see in year 3, 4, how did we do? How is that being implemented? What were the effects? Because you do something like Pasadena with the wildlife corridor. She had 2 years, and she's actually still there. A lot of times you're a presiding officer in your last term, and then you're gone completely, and they just, great, your picture's here, but we're not paying attention to you. And so, you know what I mean? They don't get it. They don't ever get back because it's now the next thing, the next person's, priorities. And it just, the way term limits work, and then also the way these presiding officers, I think they should have longer blocks of time, whether, and that would be good and bad for us, depending on who they are. But I think the system would be better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just like you were saying, controlling a budget. I mean, if every, 2 years, Nike decided that they wanted to, move from shoes to skateboard, you know what I mean? It just, there's no consistency. And this, as you said, this is a over $100 billion a year budget controlling a state of more than 20 million people. I mean, there's
Right.
not like there's even companies that operate this way.
And more of your daily life is affected by state government decisions
Oh,
than really anything else, than federal, from your driver's license to just everything, as opposed to federal policy, or even local government that state level, and it's the thing that people know and are engaged in the least amount, because they're more involved at the county level, really their city level, as they should be, and that's easiest to get to. We hear all about the federal stuff on any news feed that you're getting. State stuff and capital correspondents and the journalists that work at those budgets have been slashed. So you've got just a few reporters, thank God for the world and Bruce Ritchie and others, but they're having to cover so much ground that it becomes difficult.
right. And I mean, with the big emphasis on preemption, even things that used to be controlled by your local governments are more and more being controlled at the state level. So I thought real quick, let's talk a little bit about what happened last year, because last year was the first year of the current House Speaker and Senate President's reign, which will end this year. So it really seems like a lot of times the first year is setting the table for the second, but then this is also an election year, and those can always get a gubernatorial election. Those can always get frisky in different ways. So you kind of already mentioned that we had a lot of increased tension, especially between the House and the governor. First 6 years of DeSantis's time as governor, the legislature really, he said jump, and they said how high.
Right, and that's how it's starting to be too with like property tax. The reason why we haven't seen a property tax plan out of the Senate is because the governor hasn't given them the plan, because they're just very much they're still very much in line with that leadership, much more so with doing what the governor wants. But that's we're looking still back at last year. But you're right, that's what kind of set the tone. But it allowed us, because of that, things didn't get set like they normally would when everybody is in complete, not just harmony, but unison. So because we were able, like on the parks bill, there were major differences between the House bill and the Senate bill. And it was not until the very end where we finally were able to get, the Senate to kind of buy into the House program, which was a much stronger bill.
Absolutely. Big disagreements between the House and the Senate, especially on budget issues last year.
Yeah.
The budget is the one thing, right? They could literally show up to Tallahassee, pass a budget, and go home, and they would have done nothing wrong. But they had a really hard time getting that done last year. It went into extra special sessions all the way through. We saw legislative leaders crying. I mean, it was an intense, one of those really intense fights between the parties. That was really something to sit back and watch. And that was really because the House leadership came in and said, "We're going to own the budget, and we're not going to back down," right? And I mean, they really wanted to cut things down. I mean, we kind of had a
just on land conservation, their initial drafts were like, wait, whoa, what just happened? Right.
I mean, it was like there had kind of been an idea of like a continuing budget where whatever happened last year, you kind of just accepted that and then tinkered up and down. And the House really kind of went back to almost a zero-based budgeting approach, where they said, we're going to re-examine everything from scratch. And of course, while the policy is maybe what's most important to a lot of us, the funding is what's most important to a lot of the lobbyists and the folks who are working in the Capitol, is being able to acquire those funds. And just overall, I think we had a really good year for environmental policy, right? We had the State Park Preservation Act passed, which was, I think, an enormous win for the environmental community. We had the Appalachian oil drilling ban passed unanimously, which I would have bet my house would not have happened before session yet. And I think that really speaks, right? Just to go on a little tangent, like the importance of having a really, really great committed legislator running your bill. right? And really going to the mattresses to get it done. I mean, Representative Schoaf just refused to take no for an answer on oil drilling,
Right.
did all the meetings.
And that was another one where there was huge difference really initially between the Senate, much more, again,
enormous.
watered down version in the Senate, House. I mean, and for years we would never be able to say, oh, we like what the House is doing with parks drilling. And yet here we were.
Absolutely. But a bad year for environmental funding.
Yeah.
You can look at it from kind of a, issue by issue, with Florida Forever only getting $18 million, Springs only at 50, Florida Communities Trust with nothing. Rural Family Lands did very well, which was the Senate president's priority, but overall, disappointing. And one of the ones that I just wanted to highlight, because I think it kind of explains what you were talking about earlier about just how fickle the process is Senate Bill 2506. So just 2 years ago in 2024, Pasadomo, the House, they said, hey, we've got this sports gambling revenue that's going to be coming in. We should use that for environmental purposes, right? If we've got this kind of questionable activity, let's use the money for something really good that helps the state. So they dedicated more than 90% of that funding to the Florida Wildlife Corridor, the Water Quality Improvement Grant Program.
It was really shocking.
Yeah. And we all celebrated. We jumped up and down. Hey, it was almost like what the Amendment 1 and the LATF should have been, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or like they had done a Florida lottery, and instead of the money going to education, it was coming to the conservation causes.
Right. And it seemed like it was actually going to be additional funding, not just replacing existing. Yeah. And those passed unanimously, those bills in 2024. Press releases, celebrations all over. And then they come back this year 2025 with Senate Bill 2506, and they repeal the entire thing and knock all of that money out. Like you said, with Senator Pasadomo still in the building.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very brazen. Right.
And we saw the Water Quality Improvement Grant Program, which should have been receiving, and which is really important for Springs, Rivers. This is a competitive grant program local governments, water management districts, folks can apply into. That FSC had supported, the creation of it, and then we supported having land conservation and agricultural projects added to it so we can help out our rural areas. And after all that progress, just gutted in 1 year. And what kind of surprises me is that are the current legislative leaders not expecting the same thing to happen when they leave, or do you think they just don't care?
I'd like to think it is not that they just don't care, but I also don't think they realize the impact of backing down on some of those decisions. I mean, but that's I'd like to think that we could also do a better job of advocacy and showing the investment side of what we're asking for, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. All right. So although it seems like the 2025 legislative session just ended, it feels like we are already in the midst. It's actually committee weeks, interim committee weeks for the 2026 legislative session. But you and I were up yesterday in the Capitol testifying on bills, having meetings. So it's going. And I do feel like the last few years we've seen more bills heard during interim committee weeks.
Agree. Yep. I agree.
So interim committees started on October 6th and they run through 12/12. We already have bills, growth management bills, conservation bills, all kinds of bills being heard.
Right. Yeah, they'll run up right up to the holiday season kind of thing, and then launch session.
Right. And I mean, I as of yesterday, I think it's now up to about 600 bills that have been filed.
Yep.
And that seems like a lot, but I think we're about like a quarter of what we expect by the time this is all.
Yeah, the bill
this is all
drafting
over.
deadline is the end of this week to at least get their drafts in, and then then they have a little bit more time to file them. But yeah, there's a whole host of things that are just that are in that we're in that in between stage that every day new bills are coming out of the filing side of things and getting filed.
Right. So, let's kind of pull the curtain back a little bit on like what that before a bill gets filed, because I think most people aren't even aware of bills until they're filed. But it starts way before that, because you're going to have a legislator who has anything from a concept for a bill to this is the exact language that I want. And they submit that into something I think most people have never heard of, which is bill drafting.
Right. Which is made up. There's a House bill drafting, Senate bill drafting. They're made up of attorneys that literally they are just drafting statutorily constructing these proposals and these ideas, and they are really the most apolitical of they literally are not. They're not making policy decisions or they're just drafting to make sure that they're that they're drafted properly from a legal standpoint. And then once they get referred to committee staff, those attorneys within committee staff and that staff, they start then being a little bit more certainly, have a policy position on things and are much, more so can have ideas and thoughts and concepts that can change a proposal. And there's really kind of a couple of ways. I mean, there's like, we've been drafting a bill that we're going to talk about here in a second as a coalition. And we came up with, these ideas and this draft and pulling things from previous years, previous amendments, previous bills that had been out there. We then submit it to a member. That member, and House members are allowed to file, 7 bill slots. They have 7 bills. Senate members can file as many as they want, but we have to convince like a House member use this as one of your bill slots. Then they turn it into drafting. It comes out. It's not a public record yet. We can look at it, and you can make changes. You can send it back to drafting and just literally it's just a, red line word kind of changes. Once it gets filed and has a number, then the only way to change it is through the amendatory process, which means you have to get amendments filed in committee. It has to be heard. It has to be voted on. To change anything. But that's one way where we literally, and just like we do it, all interest, they come up with these ideas, they shop them, they hand them over to a member, they convince the member has some ideas, thoughts, it goes in. Then there's the other, I'll use Representative Cross as like an example this year on a bill that's getting ready to come out, where she was very concerned, was getting a lot of feedback on this video that was taken of a large manta ray getting captured in waters, sent to Abu Dhabi, to a SeaWorld aquarium there. And it was done under a SAL, a special license, a special authorization license by FWC. So it was all, quote, legally done and blah, blah, blah. And so she personally said, I want to, this cannot happen. I wanted to file a bill to make this not. So she then got with, I and others gave her some feedback, some people that I represent, Animal Legal Defense Fund and others, some FWC. We had meetings with FWC. We had meetings with, and FWC, of course, like, we could take care of this in rule, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, yeah, but that rulemaking process, you're not even going to start that until February, but that session is kind of done. So I'm like, you should still file a bill because otherwise you're going to leave town. It's election year. There's no guarantee. We hope, but there's no guarantee you'll even come back. I mean, no, let's force them. So anyway, but that was completely, member driven. That's more than how I have an idea. I'm going to do it. Otherwise it's coming, ideas coming from the community again. And we are the community, that kind of writ large, and we're saying the conservation community wants this, and that's how like the plastics bill kind of started.
Absolutely. And I just think it's really interesting that any legislator can put a bill into drafting for you. Doesn't mean they have to file it, right? So you get into drafting,
Put
get
it
it in that final
drafts
firm,
they
and
want.
you can go shop it
Yeah.
and find, and as you pointed out, those House bill slots, that's much more of a commodity because they, 7 bills is not a lot, especially when you don't have that long up there. So by January 9th of 2026, all the bills have to be approved to file in final form. Basically, they just have to be structured right. They have to meet all the requirements of what a bill has to say, make sure all of the references are right, because that could become law. And if I'm actually dealing with a legal issue where we have a citation in statute that's just wrong. They just snuck through bill drafting in 6 committees. And now nobody knows what they're talking about 9 years later. So, making sure those are really pinned down. And then by the 13th, deadline for filing bills and session starts for real. And there's been years where we've seen bills go through all their committee stops during interim weeks. And, they're passing bills on the floor the first week of session. And especially I think about like Senate Bill 552 in 2016, some of the other real high priority issues. I mean, first week of session, it could be done, signed by the governor, and that's it.
Yeah. And then when they pass them, it gets submitted to the governor. And if they're in session, the governor has 7 days to approve it, sign it. Not say if he doesn't sign it, it becomes law without his signature or veto it. And then, if he doesn't sign it within that 7-day window, but then after they leave, and they adjourn for the final time and they're gone, and then they send bills that they've passed, go to him. Then he has 15 days. He or she has 15 days. So, yeah, there's a lot of times when bills are being passed and certainly going to him and becoming, heading towards becoming law once their effective date comes, like July 1. But if it's effective immediately upon becoming law, then that's now the new law in the state of Florida.
So real quick, let's just look at a few of the bills that have been filed already this year that I know we're going to be working on and talking about. We won't go through all these, but I definitely want to highlight Senate Bill 240. This is auxiliary containers. For folks who have been paying attention the last couple sessions, auxiliary containers bills were something that we fought tooth and nail to the death. And this year, we're not in that situation. Auxiliary containers are very good.
I'm still looking at auxiliary containers, just the title, and I'm getting reacting and getting hives because it's like, oh, we got to kill that. And then I'm like, oh, wait, no, we don't.
Right. And, we actually had our first committee hearing yesterday during interim weeks, thanks to Senator Rodriguez, who chairs the Environment and Natural Resource Committee. She has been a huge supporter of this issue for years, very strong, protector of Miami-Dade County's waters and trying to deal with the trash. A lot of these trash regulations in the state are in those southern coastal counties that, she represents one of them. So we had that committee hearing yesterday.
Monroe.
That's right. She does, which is another, you really can't, Monroe's the Keys. If there's anywhere you need to keep trash out of, it's the Keys. But I thought that committee hearing went about as well as it could.
Oh yeah. And we talked about it. Like, do we think we have the votes? So we lobbied the members. We know we have the votes. Do we just say nothing, let it go? And we're like, no, this is there's one bill on the agenda. And B, because Senator Garcia, God bless her, showed up ready to go before the committee meeting even started, they took her first thing. So the whole thing, they were hearing that bill 2 minutes, a minute. We had the pledge and we were hearing the bill. So we were like, we have time. Let's set a tone. And boy, did we, with people from out of town, with a number of organizations. And Senator Garcia thanked everybody for being there publicly. Certainly members were, saying things like, Senator Smith and others that normally in this committee, we have fought and killed, and I'm getting thousands of emails to stop an auxiliary container bill. I'm now getting, emails, thousands of emails saying support this. It's like the weirdest, weirdest day. So it could not have gone any better. And going back to our discussion about House bill slots and how valuable they are, we had a House member that we've met the drafting deadline, but we're trying to get to file it over there. And she was watching and to see how it was going to go, because she got really in a fight last year and stood up for us, but really still has the wounds of a fight that she was in. And now she saw, wow, she's like, that was kind of awesome. So it was good.
And I think one thing kind of to highlight is I know that, one of the things that I really enjoy getting to do is getting to write legislation. I'm just an ultimate nerd, so I find that to be fun. And when we write bills, right, sometimes we're writing bills that are kind of just like messaging bills. We never expect it to pass or even get heard in a committee, but we're trying to raise an issue, right? We're trying to set the tone for maybe a future legislature, to say this is important, even if we don't have the votes now. And then there's bills like Senate Bill 240 that are absolutely written to pass. I mean, it's interesting to see how the dynamics between those bills differ. And I was really happy to see that, everyone was recognizing Senate Bill 240 as common sense, practical. Yeah. This is the middle ground to move us forward on an issue that's been hanging out there for 17 years.
I think 3 of the 4 pieces, maybe it's 4 out of 5, are things that have been around, have been proposed, even as part of last year's, as we're trying to mitigate a bad bill, but have been proposed by Republican members that, are stuff that resonate with them as it relates to state parks and other things. So grandfathering in local ordinances, et cetera. So that, being able to build off of the work that was actually done previously is key.
So let's move to what I think a lot of people want to hear is, how can we, all of us, be better advocates? I know that before I got into this process, I was a political junkie, but had absolutely no idea how to influence the process in Tallahassee. And folks who know me, my mentor, the guy who's responsible for me being here, was former Governor Bob Graham. And one of the things that he would say is advocacy is not a spectator sport, right? If you just sit in the background, you are not going to be able to do anything. You have to engage. So let's talk a little bit about how folks engage. I'm not going to go through all of this right now, but basically the video that you saw as a kid about how a bill becomes a law bears almost no relation to what happens in the Florida legislature. And a lot of the politicking, one of the things that I love to look at when a bill gets filed is how many committee stops does it have, right? You see a bill with 1 or 2 committee stops, that means that the leadership, which makes the choice of what committee it goes to, they're kind of blessing that bill with an easy route. You see a bill that's got 4 committee stops piled onto it to get through in 60 days. That tells you that there might be some reluctance at the top about hearing that bill. And the average bill gets 3 committee stops. Typically you're going to go through a policy committee, maybe an appropriations subcommittee, and then you're going to end up in either appropriations or fiscal, something like that, depending on the bill. Right. To become law, all that has to happen is the same language has to be passed in both chambers. And because we have one party control of government, they can waive the rules, and that can happen in a lot of ways. So, last year we had a bill that was never even filed in the House. And, a lot of people say, well, it wasn't filed in the House. How is it ever going to become law? But they passed it out of the Senate, sent it over to the House passed it, they waived the rules, and that was it. So, you can never assume anything's dead. We see zombie bills all the time, zombie language. So if a bill's filed if it's never heard in a committee, then theoretically that language is dead for the year. You can't take a bill that was filed that never gets heard and tack it on to another bill. But once you get through one committee, like we did yesterday with Senate Bill 240, that language is now in play.
Alive and available, right?
For any bill that happens to be about a related subject. So, it's a very complicated process.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, and that, it's called germane or germanity, and it's either germane by title. So if it's the same kind of thing, auxiliary containers, if there was another bill, or by opening up the chapter, not even just this, it doesn't have to be the sub set. So either by title or by, if it's opening up chapter, 558 or whatever chapter it is, that whole chapter is now available. And if your bill also opens at that chapter, maybe in a different place, but you now can amend that into that bill.
And we saw, last year on auxiliary containers,
Yep.
They tried to amend it onto some language in the House, and the House ruled it was non-germane. It said you can't do it. And then the same exact thing got considered in the Senate, and the Senate said, well, no, this is fine.
Right. And then it came back, over from that, so now it's in there, it's in the bill. So now they're not running an amendment to ask in the House if it's germane or not. It's now the bill. Right.
So, even when it comes to things that might seem simple, like is something germane or not, politics and what leadership wants still has a lot to do with it, because with one party control, they've got the 2/3 they need at basically any time. Real quick for everyone, these are the websites that you kind of need if you want to track bills. I don't know about you. I typically live on the Senate website. I just find it to be so much more.
It's much easier. And it's got a really good built-in tracker that anybody can use.
Really good. I mean, we used to have one at a previous nonprofit that we paid for, and we actually think that the Senate one is faster for sure, but also better. And anyone can sign up for it. If you go to flsenate.gov, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see where you can sign up for the tracker. It's totally free, and you can set how you basically decide what committees you want to follow, what bills you want to follow, how often you want to get alerts, and it does a great job of keeping you up to date.
You put bill in up in the at the top, it'll have a block for bill numbers. You put one in like 240, and because all bills are even, all House bills are odd, you don't have to worry about it being SB or HB. The system will know when it sees that zero, all right, the Senate bill. So you put it in, and then when it comes up, then there's that button there that says, you can add it to your tracker, and then when you'll know when that bill is going to get heard in committee, if it passed, if there's amendments
filed, anything. Yep. And you can get all the House bills on the Senate website. So really, I think the only thing you don't get on the Senate website for the House is the vote history. I think that's the one thing I have to go to the House is to get the House vote history. But otherwise, I live on flsenate.gov. I do like to check out the lobbyist disclosures. I think it's, when Speaker Corcoran was in office, did some things I might not agree with, but I really like the lobbying rules that he put in place. So you can go to flhouse.gov/LD, put in a bill, and see every lobbyist that is registered to work on that bill. And I always think it's something I always look at when we're working on something to see who are our allies, who are our opposition, where are our opportunities.
Yep.
All right. Real quick, how to read a bill. This is actually from the banning oil drilling bill last year. Reading a bill is very simple on its face. If it is underlined, it is new language. And if it is stricken, it is language that is being deleted. Anything that is not underlined or stricken is existing statute. But I will tell you, you look at something like this and you think, oh, that'll take 5 minutes to read. But what really the hard part is understanding the context and going through and reading, here we're amending 377.242. and we're jumping right into it, right? But you need to know the context behind the bills. So I always, whenever we have interns, I'm always telling people, you need to be clicking on every reference that's in the bill. Read that whole section, because you're not going to understand how the bill fits into the overall structure without getting into it. But it's super simple. I mean, reading legislation, if you can get through high school, you can read these bills, figure out what they say, and with a little bit of research, be able to understand, what's happening firsthand, and not just have to take people's word for it. I mean, we try to put out as accurate information as possible, but I've seen, within our community and outside of it, sometimes bad info going out about what bills do or don't do. If it's an issue you really care about, I always say, open it up and read the bill. Most of the bills are like 5 pages. I mean, you get the occasional 180-page monster.
The Parks bill was short.
A few pages. I think our plastics bill this year has about 3 actual pages of text. Yep. All right.
Also, you can go on that tracker when you're looking at a bill. It also has a bill analysis. And so the staff does an analysis that gives you like a history of the issue, and kind of what the effects of the changes would be. Again, it's written from a point of view of a staff member that might be wanting to put a slant on it one way or the other, but at least it provides a pretty good middle of the road context of it, in English, kind of what it's doing. So it helps you as you read the bill.
All right, Travis, we're getting to the end. I know your time is valuable. So, these are things that I've picked up. A lot of these are things that I learned from Governor Graham and Nat Reed and some of the other folks that I've worked with. And a lot of it really applies to, folks like me and you that are kind of organizing these efforts. But we've got people who really, they themselves, they want to figure out how they can make a difference. It's something I hear all the time. How can I engage in the process and make a difference? You work with folks like me, but I also see, you were up in the Capitol yesterday guiding dozens of
we had like 30
ladies wearing buttons. What are your, give people like your top 3, like what are the 3 like best pieces of advice that you have for folks on what they need, how can they be effective advocates for their own issues?
Well, know who everybody has 2 legislators, a House member and a Senate member. You can go on those websites if you don't know, and there's links on both of those that say, find your legislator, and by putting in your address, you'll be told who those are. And I make it a point of communicating with them. You can certainly call, email. Best, obviously, is just going into their offices. They're local in your community. They're during, other than the 60 days or during the committee weeks, they're in the district. I mean, they're not like in DC, they're there in your community. So you can set up meetings. It's much better to have that meeting there, because you can have a more meaningful conversation than in Tallahassee, where you have 15 minutes where they're bombarded with stuff. So just know who your 2 are and say, look, things are going to come across your desk dealing with, these issues that I'm interested in, Springs, conservation issues. I may not know all the answers, but I can, use me as a resource, because I'm in your community. You're my state representative. I care about these. If you have questions, I'll get you answers. And then the other thing is, if you don't know and you say, I'm going to get you an answer, then you got to follow up and make sure you do. You can't leave them hanging, because then they'll never ask you again. You certainly, obviously, I think it's obvious, you can't lie about something.
Or guess.
Don't guess. You can make something up. You got to know. If you don't know, that's fine, and you can get an answer to them. But you can't just make stuff up, because there's going to be an expert on, some developer, lawyer is going to tell them something and show them where you're wrong, and that's just not going to be great. The other thing is we've got to get away from, and I guess this would be kind of like the next to last bullet there, but that, Republicans aren't going to listen to what I have to say, and my legislators are Republicans, so I'm just going to sit this one out. We have people like Senator Bradley up in Northeast Florida, tons of Springs in her district, and she single-handedly, will go and work very well behind the scenes to people on certain, growth management or growth mismanagement bills, however you want to put it, but on those types of bills, on state park stuff, on other things to say, hey, this is going to impact Springs. She state parks. She took her family to state parks regularly to camp. And so, anybody can be an advocate. We have Senator Garcia, Republican in Miami, but they're in Biscayne Bay on the water, cares about these issues. So it doesn't matter, get the, we may not approve of what they're saying on certain news channels and other kinds of things about some stuff, but, let them have a chance on our issues. And so I would definitely, work across that. Social media is huge. They all have, they're all on X and they're all on Instagram and they're all on these things. Like this group that we made sure that we took a picture with we had 42 visits over a course, with different, I had a group of 30. So I divided them up into 6 groups of like 5. They hit all these meetings, but we said, can we take a picture with you? They all 100% said absolutely. And then you tag them. They love that. They get identity with that. If they do something good or they're supporting something, or Senator Smith has said something, positive that you may see in the paper, or we've told you, hey, they're on a committee they're voting on, mentioning them, tagging them in, and then also thanking them. They all get hammered when they don't do something, but if they actually do help on something, make sure we're taking the time to thank them for that as well. Also, and Ryan is excellent at this. Don't be timid in what our ask is. I know there's so many times we'll be in these large group meetings of conservationists, and they'll be like, "Oh, Ryan's going to ask for too much. I don't know. Maybe we should just live with what we got." No, this is a process, and we're going to ask for this, and we're not going to negotiate amongst ourselves. Now, yeah, we're pragmatic, and we're going to ask for this, and if we need to come here to get the, but if we want this, there's no, and we only ask for this, we're never going to get this. We're
going to end up getting this.
Right. So always, it's a matter. It's a negotiation. So we'll negotiate with the others, but for our stuff, we need to be very clear and very aggressive and bold in what we're wanting to have done.
And I think what we learned last session is if you combine all of those things, right? You work across the aisle, right. You focus on your issue, you are, smart and honest about it, and you say thank you, and, you can get what you want, right? I mean, we, both state parks and oil drilling, we refuse to back down. And, right. The language that we asked for the entire time is what ended up passing, right? Because our champions demanded, they were with us, right? They were, right. They knew this is what we needed. They felt strong.
The auxiliary container bill, the bad one from last year, 1822, I think it was, the whole process that kind of hijacked another bill as it relates to incinerators, et cetera. There was a member, the Senate kept sending it over to the House. I want to say that bill bounced back 4 times.
At least. Yeah.
At least 4 times. And she, every single time, and the member that stood up for us to strip out language and that was bad and send it back. And we could have accepted, they kept trying. What about if we give you this? And it wasn't good. But her name, I mean, it's Meg Weinberger, and her nickname, because she's in Palm Beach, she's very close to the current administration, so everybody kind of refers to her as MAGA Meg. So on paper, at no point, if you had said in session last year was in March, if you had said in February, MAGA Meg is gonna be the one that 4 times is going to stand up and kill her own bill to save a bad bill from passing. She's going to kill her own bill and know that she's doing it to keep something back. We would have been like, well, you're totally on meth. Not going to happen. And that's exactly what happened. So you cannot write off somebody. And now, she very much is engaged in this fight as it relates to plastic issues.
Yeah, and I mean, I've learned that party does not mean nearly as much as I thought it did when I got involved in this process. These are people. They're people that care about their local communities. They care about the environment, and environmentalism really is becoming a bipartisan issue again. I mean, every bill, they're all sponsored by Republicans, and there's not exactly a lot of like liberal Republicans. So I mean, this is the fact. This is because we work on an issue that Floridians care about, and these folks care about the environment.
Because going back to the things that we said at the beginning, the reason why, like a Senator Garcia, nothing against them, but we absolutely could have a Senate Democrat, and then then it becomes like you say, this is kind of a messaging bill. We can put stuff out on social media, all that stuff. It might get a hearing. They'll say, all right, we're going to give you this, a hearing on this, but it's not, the likelihood of passage is low. But no, we're going to have, somebody that chairs a committee, a budget committee in the Senate is doing it. She it's a Republican bill that, went through with literally high praise from everybody that said anything about it yesterday. So, so that it's, they're doing good bills as well. So,
and I feel like we build those relationships a lot in the trenches. I mean, we were there fighting these bad bills for 2 years with Senator Garcia. I find that you tend to, develop these close relationships and develop the trust in the trenches. And then, those advocates, I mean, those legislators just become invaluable once you're able to engage and get with them.
We thanked Representative Weinberger, MAGA Meg. We didn't say,
we celebrated her. Yeah. And Garcia and everyone else.
Yeah. Harrell on the Parks bill, Snyder, all of them. And that then they appreciate that. That's the, we're not operating with campaign contributions and other things. We're 501c3 organizations. That's not our, but we have the value that we have, the resource that we have, the commodity that we trade in is in spreading good word about who they are and what they're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that Chloe and I decided a couple of years ago is we're just always going to thank legislators. When someone does something, it doesn't matter what they did the day before. We are going to thank them.
If you do the right thing today, thank you.
And if that ticks off some of our, constituents on another issue, that's just too bad. And we found that legislators care. They see it. They follow social media. Their staff follows social media.
You walk down the hall and they know they're keeping track.
It builds relationships. And I think, Cynthia makes a great point. All Democrats are absolutely not environmental champions. I have learned you go person by person. You need to just, you can't make any assumptions on party one way or the other. Typically the Dems are on our side, but we've seen a lot of bad votes that went through unanimous. So, that happens. All right. Last question from me, Travis, before we get to any questions from the folks watching. One of the things that the Springs Council really leans into is asking our members to contact their legislators, whether that be emails, phone calls, or for our most committed advocates, like the folks who came yesterday, actually showing up in person to talk with their legislators.
Campaign is excellent. Yep.
And it matters, right? I mean, I guess that's the question. Right. Yeah.
That's why, yes, it absolutely matters. And that's why, like Smith said yesterday, I've gotten all of these emails in support of this. Those all came from I think maybe let's not say all, but the vast majority came from your do-gooder campaign. And for people that are on this webinar, signing up, getting those alerts, and then not just trashing it, it takes no time at all. And that was now registered.
And I mean, I don't think a lot of the special interests are able to generate the amount. I mean, I tend to hear every year. It seems like the issues where they're hearing the most from their constituents are environmental issues. I think we've come so far as a community over the last 5 years.
Oh yeah,
and having people flex that power.
Yep, the state parks bill. So, some of the craziness that now, with like alligator Alcatraz, that now is leading to, Republicans even saying, as they go into this budget year, we keep giving the governor like these pots of money for emergency, management stuff. That's not. Yeah, maybe we need to look at that's taxpayer dollars. I mean, just the contract for the porta potties for that is $50 million. Because if you were to put a facility and you were to pick the most expensive, worst place to put it, I mean, if you needed a detention center, that put it somewhere else. Put it in a prison that's not being used or something. But to put it in a place where you literally have to bus, truck everything in, everything out. There's no infrastructure. There's no electricity. There's no water. You have to bring all that in. There's generators running 24/7. That is, insanity. And so now even conservatives are starting to say, what are we spending taxpayer dollars for? It's just the wrong place. So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. And to close up, let's see. Do we have any questions that have come in? Chloe. Oh, hey, Rick. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. What are you hearing regarding corrections to Senate Bill 180? I know you've had some conversations, Travis.
Yeah.
Anything you can share?
Yeah, I was just yesterday had another meeting with Senator Nick DeSegli from Pinellas County, who had filed 180. He lives in a coastal community. His house was damaged. So he's dealing with, if you're familiar with Pinellas County, dealing with multiple municipalities along the coast there. And there was just so much red tape and things after Helene and Milton to get. And so the bill started off as, kind of streamlining some of that local government to be able to rebuild. But then it became something completely different. He said again yesterday to my face in a meeting, I am working on changes. I will be giving them to you. You can get it out. People like Ryan and others will review that. Let me know, where we are, because it went further than I wanted. There's certain unintended consequences that we have to rein back in, and we are going to be making changes to that. I don't know yet. I'm still ascertaining where, how, what the appetite is for changes in the House. So those will have to really hit the House to make sure. But I do know that, the Senate, certainly the sponsor of 180, and the Senate want to change it. And so we will be working to make sure that they're meaningful changes, but that also, especially in those two sections of concern, and then making sure that the House follows through with changing it as well.
That is great news. Next one, Clay. Oh, we've already talked. So Florida. Oh, can you name any Florida senators or reps who've been defeated?
I thought about this when you mentioned this earlier to me, that as a question that had come in advance. I certainly can't think of any in like the last 20 years. I do know the only one that comes as like an example was this Chris Dorworth in Seminole County area. There was some very, sensitive Seminole County, and I don't remember the project, some Split Oak, maybe something Oak, but big development project that he was on the wrong side of, and certainly the community and those there were against this particular development, and that might have that could have had an effect on him getting beat, but other than that, that's the only one that really kind of comes to mind.
But we've certainly seen a lot of local government elections.
Oh yeah,
we've seen quite a few county commissioners and city commissioners get kicked out, and again, I think some of that comes back to what we were talking about earlier with the closed primaries and gerrymandering, and it's very hard to get a legislator out.
I mean, in a general election typically is not oftentimes is not. It's not a nail biter where they're waiting. You got to wait till midnight to see the result. I mean, they know by 7:10 they're calling it. I mean, it's over.
Yep. And
competitive is in the primaries. So, and then they also try to kind of clear out, like there's a special election coming in Tampa, Senator Jay Collins' seat, because he got appointed to be lieutenant governor, because the lieutenant governor got appointed to be FIU president. So there's a special election, and it was going to be pretty competitive between our current secretary of DVPR and a state rep, but they just kind of cleared the field. So now not going to be competitive.
Right. Next one, Clay. Identify legislators who typically support the Springs conservation, manatee survival, and river restoration projects. You already mentioned Senator Bradley. She has been an awesome champion for us. Representative Schoaf over in the Panhandle for Wakulla Springs has been incredible. Senator Smith, always there for us. Rep Escamani, always there for us. Rep Cross, always there for us. But also, Senator Garcia and Rodriguez and Rep Mooney on Keys.
I was just going to say Rep Mooney from the Keys, but still, because of the Keys, highly sensitive, environmentally sensitive area. He is, there people can say go back and forth on certain things. Everybody does, but even Broder. I think in a lot of ways, Senator Broder is certainly doesn't disregard conservation issues in that Seminole County, Central Florida district as well.
I have a lot of hope for Rep Connerly. Only
his
second year, but he's a stormwater guy. He understands the issues. He had a few good environmental bills last year and managed to get some stuff passed his first session, which is always a good sign. So he's an up-and-comer I'm really looking forward to working with.
Yeah.
What else you got, Chloe? What's the status of releasing the Rodman Dam? Will another bill be filed? We certainly hope so.
Yes. We absolutely hope so. I think, as of today, I would say probably maybe 70%, more than 50%, but I wouldn't go much higher than 70% chance that we will see a bill filed. Then we got to make sure that it's, there's going to be give and take. So is it doing enough? Is it doing the right thing? It's, certainly searching for or hoping for a partial breach. If that's they're not, the dam, the whole thing isn't going to get like blown up, bridge over the River Kwai stuff. But I think certainly a partial breach for full restoration of that reuniting the rivers. That is another one that's been, a lot of good coalition building on. It's one of those that it's almost like it's time. It's like, you're fighting against, nature by in many ways, but by fighting against that, it's like, at some point, smoking was going to go out of restaurants and airplanes. I mean, it just, that's the way, we're living in the future kind of thing. So I think we will see a bill. We're certainly really, really hopeful. And then we'll be able to analyze it, make sure it's passing again, like a parks bill. It's not one of these that just has a great name, but doesn't do anything. We need to make sure that it's doing what we want. Right now, they're doing the drawdown, and people are really beginning to see in that area in Putnam County what the benefits, like they can kind of see a preview of what life could, how the world could look, and how helpful it could be.
All right. And I know you're one of the busiest guys in the state, Travis. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, this was great information. Anyone who's watching, this will be on YouTube for perpetuity. So really encourage you to share this with anybody who wants this good information, this great mix of timely info and stuff that'll, evergreen and will always be relevant. If you're here, you're probably already a member or an informed advocate of FSC, but if not, please become one. Our brand new thing is the text alerts that we're using during session, which is a great way. A lot of times, as Travis will tell you, like, we can get an amendment filed to a bill at 5:30 for a bill that's up at 8:30 in the morning. Text alerts.
Email is even becoming too slow on a lot. I mean, it's instantaneous stuff now. Yeah.
So you can text FSC to 844-722-3080. Don't have to be a member. Don't have to give us any money. We just want your help in trying to improve our springs, rivers, conserve land, protect wildlife, and all the other things that we care about. Thank you so much again, Travis. I'll be seeing you up again in the Capitol. Yep. Thank you all for being here.
Yep, absolutely.
Hope everybody has a great night.
Thank you.